Thank you for watching today. My name is Linda Lovisa and I am in West Kelowna, British Columbia. Today I'm going to demonstrate the art of double and triple loading your brushes. So what I've done is I've added the ultramarine blue and the yellow medium on the opposite side. And when I'm on my palette, what I'm doing is I'm tapping the color onto it and pulling towards me. And then I flip my brush and then I add the yellow and I pull it towards me so that I have both colors on my brush double loaded. So what does that look like when I go to this poster board? I'm going to demonstrate how I start, and these are techniques that I use when I'm painting, and I'll demonstrate that later. But I really want you to see what the color does. So if I want a lighter green, I'm going to start with the yellow. If I want to add a little bit more blue to that green, let's say I want more of a medium green, all I have to do is flip my brush. So if you can see that I've got my thumb here, my index finger here, and I'm holding it in a very specific way, like so. I can roll my brush and I can switch from a light green all the way to a darker green. Now you're probably thinking, okay, that looks like pure yellow. Well, let me show you what pure yellow looks like. So when I'm loading my brush, so here's pure yellow. So you can see that it's definitely got a greenish hue to it right here. So let's move that brush along and you can see what that does. Now, I started from the yellow, like so. Now if I flip my brush, notice how I just roll it in my fingers and I can get into a dark green. Now as I'm painting, let's say I'm painting a landscape with a whole bunch of trees in it, and I need a lighter color, I just flip my brush and then I can get to a lighter color, just like so. So now let's say I need it to be much lighter, so then I go to my palette and I pick up a little bit more green of the yellow on my brush. Okay, I don't mix on my palette, I mix up here. I can add the yellow up here and then add more of the blue to it when I come to a darker area in my painting. So as you can see, I've now got some lighter greens and I've got some darker greens over here. So you can see where it was predominantly blue here, but all I have to do is just pick up that color and I can move that color over here. So when I'm painting, I can go into a whole range of greens. Now, I don't need to rinse my brush at this point if I want a different green. So this is using ultramarine blue and the yellow medium. Let's say I want more of a cerulean blue in my greenery in the mix. So I still have the yellow here on this side of my brush and the blue on this side. Now remember that I'm painting a landscape with a variety of different types of trees. So what I'm looking for is a variety of color within that space. So let's pick up, let's say, cerulean blue. There's the cerulean blue on the same side as the ultramarine blue, and you're probably thinking, oh, that's a terrible idea. But remember that whatever you pick up last is going to be deposited first. So let's go over here, all right? And now if I flip my brush and add the yellow to it, and look how easily that is. Easily done that is. And now if I want it to be a little bit lighter, again, I go back to my palette, I just pick up more yellow. I still have some cerulean blue here, and you can see a touch of the ultramarine blue as well. So I can lighten this, going back into the yellow, and flip my brush, I can go back into cerulean blue. Now you'll notice that the ultramarine blue is also mixing with the cerulean blue, which is wonderful because that gives you a variety of greens within that space. So I can keep on painting. Now let's say I need it to be a lighter green still. And the first reaction would be, oh, let's add white. But that creates a tint within that same, but if I switch to, let's say, a yellow light, then that's going to give me a lighter green. So over here, I've got the ultramarine blue, the cerulean blue has pretty much been completely deposited up here. So if I want to do the cerulean blue with the yellow light, then I need to pick up some more of the cerulean blue. So I just go to my palette, pick it up, and I can go right straight to the yellow light. So now I have yellow light on the side where I started out with the cadmium yellow, which looks a bit like this, but my brush of course has paint on it already, so I'm not going to get a pure color there. But let's do that over here. So there's the yellow light, and I flip my brush and add the cerulean blue. So as I'm painting, I'm rotating my brush continuously. So I'm going down here, adding more here. I can go, you know, and I can blend these two colors together. I can pick up some color from here and add it to here. So you're really playing with color. I'm just going to set this brush down, and I'm just going to load up a brush with some earth colors, which is triple loading your brush. So let's set this one down. I just lay it on my palette so that it just stays hydrated, it won't dry out. I'm using a wet palette, and I can show you that little wet palette system later. Now, when I'm triple loading my brush, and very important, by the way, always hydrate your brushes before you get started. So hydrating your brushes basically is just getting them wet so that the bristles can absorb the paint into the core of the brush, because that's what gives you a longer painting time when you're actually working on a painting. So I'm going to triple load my brush. So I'm going to use the ultramarine blue. And I'm also going to use the red medium. So here you've got ultramarine blue and red medium. And I'm going to add the yellow medium. So here we go. The red, the blue, and the yellow. So you're probably thinking, how on earth do you know what color that you have? Well, it's all about how I pick up. So this particular mixture, if we want to call it that, is predominantly blue. So I know that the blue and the red are going to give me a darker brown than if I was to do the red and the yellow with a bit of blue. So let's do that. So let's start with the blue and the red together, and look how pretty that is already. And look at this beautiful dark color we've got here. Now, it's more on the yellow side as far as the, the brown hues go. So I'm going to add a little bit more red, and I'm going to get a reddish brown. Now let's see how that works when you're working. And let's see how this is going to work. And then I can pull color from here and from here, and we can get a really nice array of browns. And the more I go along, and you can see how it's starting to get darker, that's because in the core of the brush, it's starting to blend. And you can see that now I'm going to start to get into the gray tones, the gray values, because I have stretched out most of the red and the yellow in the early stages here. So then I've got red and blue with just a tiny bit of yellow in the core. Now I can change that just by flipping my brush, like so. And I can add that to it. And I can move the color around. So I can take color from over here, and I can alter that color here. So that's just a little trick. Now, of course, doing something like this is very helpful to practice it in your sketchbook. The more you can just do like little color swatches like this, the more you're going to learn about the portions on your brush, and then you can predict it a little bit easier when you go to do your painting. Now, let's put this into practice of what I was just showing. Now this is really just a couple of very brief, it's a brief demonstration of how to use your brush and how to pull the color along. But how does that work in a painting? So let's do that. So I'm just going to remove this board here so that it's not so distracting. And here we go. All right. Now, I'm just going to set this aside, and let's pull up something that, you know, you might want to work on. So I'm just going to set this brush here to rest. Just going to give it a little bit of a dip and set it on my palette. Now, this is what I'm going to demonstrate for you today, and hopefully you can see this okay. Actually, I'll just do this first. So this is just a fall scene with a road coming through. The forest area is quite dark. The reason why I chose this one is because this can be a very intimidating scene to paint. So I'm going to show you how you can simplify something like this by using a piece of parchment paper. So when I'm looking at something like this, I'm looking at all the forms and the shapes of things, it's the areas that you need to think about when you're blocking in. So look for the larger shapes. So I'm just going to set this up here so you can see what I've done. So all I've done is I've just taken a piece of parchment paper. If you're having a hard time seeing it, and you know, some artists, you know, some beginners, and you know, some artists who are accustomed to painting as well, with a little bit more experience, sometimes have a difficult time distinguishing what the main shapes might be in something like this. So I've kind of drawn it out, just you know, just outlining some of those shapes, the main shapes. And if I bring it over here, I'll just take that here for now. I don't know how well that'll stay up. This parchment paper, of course, is quite slippery, but let's just double tape it and see what happens. There we go. Now, when I'm getting ready to paint, I always do a tonal wash. So here's my tonal wash for this image. So what I've done is I've used the red light and some water, and it's very much like a watercolor technique where it's just very, very wet, and then I map it all out. So basically just getting the shapes in there just to kind of get an idea of where my main large shapes are. So once I've done this, then I go into what's called the blocking in stage. So when I'm blocking in, it kind of looks like this. It looks a mess, actually. So don't be alarmed. Here we go. So this is blocked in. So what I've done is basically I've just blocked in what I call local color. This is nowhere near what it's going to look like when it's finished. And some of my students from the past, they really hate this stage. So because you have to sort of minimize it. You don't want to look at any of the detail at all. You want to just look at the areas that you need to work in. So now let's take the double and triple loading techniques and let's put them to work on this canvas here. So now I'm going to just hydrate this canvas a little bit. Just it's just a mist of water. And my reason for that is just because I haven't worked on this canvas for a few days, and just misting it allows the paint to just kind of move along on here and not be quite so stiff when I use my brushes on here. And it's really hardly anything at all. So it's just to hydrate my canvas a little bit. Gives me a little bit more painting time as well. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off with this area here because it's such a complicated area, so it seems. So I've got the background blocked in here with the violet. So what I used was ultramarine blue and red medium with a tiny bit of white. There are some sky openings here that you can barely see, but those would come in much later. So let's start with that. So I'm going to load up another brush here, and I'm going to use the ultramarine blue and the red medium. And I'm just going to get started by bringing in the ultramarine blue and the red medium together here. So notice how the red and the blue are on the brush, and I'm moving my brush along. And as I'm moving my brush along, I can tell that I need a little bit more blue on my brush because I want to keep those areas fairly dark. So then I just go back to my palette and I pick up more blue. Now, the wonderful thing about this, you can see right away where you need to make your adjustments. And one of the things I read a long time ago was painting is a series of adjustments. You're adjusting shape, you're adjusting form, you're adjusting color. So that is what painting is all about. So if you can see what's happening on your canvas right before your eyes, it's much easier to adjust that color than if you're trying to mix that perfect color on your palette. So I'm just picking up more of the blue and the red, and you're going to see how this works, and you're gonna wonder, okay, what is she doing? Why is she adding the blue and the red in those areas? Those areas are my shadow areas. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm just pulling the color from my palette and mixing directly on my canvas. Now, I want you to sort of pay attention to the color I've got here. This is purple, by the way. It's red and blue. Red and blue give you purple. And it isn't until you add white that you see the tints in the purple. But when it's just mixed like so on your canvas, it gives you a beautiful earth tone. So you don't even have to add yellow to it at this point. I will be adding some yellow to it, but you can see how all of a sudden that forest is starting to have some density. And I'm just going to bring this in really quickly here and just block in some large areas here, and then I'm going to switch brushes. So when I'm working, I always have 3 or 4 brushes, sometimes 5 brushes on the go, so that I can switch from an earth tone to my greens within just moments. So you're not spending all that time on your palette trying to mix that perfect green. You're going to mix it right here where you can see the difference. So notice how I'm bringing in the purples that I used earlier. Here's my brush here. And I'm bringing that into the greens to make it a little bit more mossy green. I can flip my brush. See how the yellow and the blue are here? I can flip my brush and bring in some of the lighter greens, and I'm pulling that color over. See how I'm using this blocked in area and pulling it over to give me a moss green. Now there are some really nice brights in here. I'm going to wait a few minutes before I bring that in. Now I'm just going to switch brushes. Need more paint on there. So on my palette, you'll notice that I'm pulling the blue and the red from the same pool that I pulled earlier, so that I still have some fresh paint in the center area. So I'm just going to block this in really quickly here. There we go. And I'm going to bring some of that down here too. So as I'm painting, I'm also looking at all of the areas that I'm working in. So this area here needs to be quite dark, quite a bit darker. I'll leave that for a moment. And I'm going to go back to my green brush. And now I've picked up yellow medium. I'm going to bring that over here. And I still have blue on my brush. So the minute that I put a little bit of pressure on my brush, the blue from the core of my brush is depositing with the yellow that I just picked up, which is giving me a nice bright yellow green. There we go. Merge that in a little bit. Now, what I'm trying to capture is a feeling, not necessarily an identical scene that is pictured up here. So what I'm doing is I'm painting sort of the feeling that I had when I was taking my photograph. So by bringing in the colors in certain places, and notice how my stroke work there we go, bringing the colors in certain places is really just capturing the mood of the day. Most of my stroke work so far has been a vertical stroke work. And now I'm going to start to bring in some horizontal lines. So this area here is much lighter, so I'm just going to pick up some more of the yellow, and I'm just going to deposit that yellow and as I'm working, I'm still rolling my brush. So I'm going to bring that blue down here a little bit more and pull it into the earth tones over here. Bring that down, and let's bring in a little bit more color there. So I'm picking up more yellow and more blue. So the yellow that I'm picking up is the cadmium yellow medium with the ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to do this and move this color around, picking up more of the blue and the red. And I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow to that. I want it to be a little bit lighter. And I'm just going to bring that in and pull that down. There we go. And bring that in and start to shape what's behind there. Now, that is not the focal point. Our focal point is down here where the light is really hitting. But I just wanted to show you a little bit of the work that I would do in the background. And then I'm going to switch to the middle ground and then the foreground. So let's deal with this section here. I'm going to move that over. Something like that. And remember that the first layer of paint before you start getting into any kind of detail is the block in stage. And this is still part of the blocking in stage, but now I'm starting to shape some of the things in that background just by moving my brush around and adding some light. And I've got the dark tones deposited already. I'm going to add a little bit more light right here. I'm going to use the yellow light this time with a bit of the cerulean blue just to kind of brighten this area here. And I'm going to pull in some more yellow light there. So that's the cerulean blue. I have not rinsed my brush yet, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit more of that yellow. So instead of rinsing my brush when I'm sort of done in an area, I set that brush down and then pick up a new brush. Usually try and keep it the same style of brush so that your stroke work is similar, even though it's a newly loaded brush. So when I find a favorite brush, I will buy several of them once I find that I really love how that brush works. Then I will pick up several of them, and I will have them for when I'm doing something like this, and then I can just switch from one brush to another. And now I'm developing this a little bit more just so you can see how this whole technique works. Now I'm just going to move that over there and pick up a bit more of the yellow, and I'm going to use a little bit of cobalt blue, just switching it up a little bit. And I'm just going to bring in the yellow medium with some cobalt blue right here. It's good to vary, especially if you have a lot of green in a painting, vary your pickup between your blues so that you're getting a nice variety. And the paints that I'm using are Tri-Art, and I really like it because if I want to work like with palette knives, a little bit heavier body, I don't necessarily have to buy the mediums. I can just go directly into the paint with my palette knives, and I get a really nice consistency. So here we go again. I'm just picking up a bit more of that blue. Now this particular road is in northwestern Ontario, by the way. So if you're from the north, this kind of a scene might be familiar to you. I'm just going to try and really quickly work through here. So work a little faster here. I think I'm a bit nervous. Not done this before. So bear with me. It's a bit intimidating, but you know what an adventure this is. So let's just go with it, and just gonna try and just get through this little section here using quite a bit of paint. That is one of the tricks with acrylic. Make sure you're using enough paint. That is my motto. Use more paint and you can move it around. So that if your paintbrush starts to drag, that means you don't have enough paint on your brush, then just pick up more paint. So let's quickly move through here. Now I will not be able to get this completed in a demonstration, but what I'm really trying to show you today is the loading and how you can move your paint along without mixing on your palette, and the advantages to it. So let's get this area here blocked in, because this area here is going to make a big difference as to what happens over here. So I'm going to pick up some of the ultramarine blue, and I'm also going to pick up some of the cobalt blue. Just get that blocked in there. And remember our shape. So I'm really like this area here is this area here. So what I do here is going to make a big difference with how it's related to this area. So picking up more of the yellow and some cobalt blue, and I'm going to deposit that over here. We have some beautiful light coming in there, and it goes right up here like so. Bring in more yellow. There we go. Using the edge of my brush, shaping some of those evergreens. Picking up more of the blue, ultramarine blue this time, a little bit more. There we go. Bring that down. So this brush here has the red and the blue and the yellow from earlier when I was doing earth tones. So it's still got some good stuff on here. So let's use this brush here, picking up the yellow deep, and I'm just going to bring in some of that gold colors in here. And let's go over here too. Bring some of that over here. There we go. Ah, it's starting to happen. I love this part when I'm starting to see the glow. Now let's pick up some more yellow, like so, and bring that over up here. And you're probably wondering, okay, I did a heavy deposit over here, but watch what happens. So I'm bringing that over, carrying it over, and I'm cutting into it. See how I'm cutting in? And I'm going to capture the edges of those trees coming out. So here we go, just the beginning of it. And of course, much later on, then I would, you know, fine tune some of the edges of those branches if it needs to be done. There we go. Bring that color down. Back to this brush here. Now, more blue. So this is my green brush. Actually, I've got two green brushes happening now, I think. There we go. And pull that up. There we go. Bring that color down. Back to the blue. I'm using cobalt blue and the ultramarine blue together. Don't be afraid to mix your blues. So cobalt and ultramarine. Because when you add the yellow, then you're going to get a variety of greens. There we go. Now, we've got some green over here. Let's bring some of that over there. Pull that down. And a little bit brighter, so let's pick up some yellow light. Just start to bring some of those trees in. There we are. Something like that. And let's bring this tree in here. Now don't forget to step back from your artwork when you're working, and I'm going to do that shortly here so that I can see what's happening. Because when you're working up close, you really need to step away from your work so that you can see if you're on the right track or not. And it's surprisingly how that works. The other self-critique that you can do is you can always reverse it in a mirror, and that's always a really great way to self-critique as well. If you're not sure of something, if you reverse the image in a mirror, and you'll see it right away. It will just jump out at you. So if you're ever unsure about what you're doing, you can do that. So I just picked up some more yellow, and so far I have not rinsed a brush. One of the reasons is because I'm using multiple brushes, but another reason is because you don't really have to. If you're staying within the, let's say, the green range, you can load your brush as many different times with various blues and yellows and not have to rinse your brush, because the whatever you pick up first and second as a color goes is what gets deposited. So the core of your brush, of course, will be the very first two colors that you picked up, or three colors in the combination that you first loaded your brushes, which is kind of neat to see when you do that in your sketchbook. And I strongly recommend that you give it a try in your sketchbook. It's a bit intimidating when you first start out, because you're so used to looking for that exact color that you need. But really, it's just so much fun to paint this way without having to worry too much about mixing on your palette. Now I've just loaded up another brush, and I'm using a flat, and I'm going to start to work in this area here. So again, I'm going to roll my brush as I work along. So both colors have been loaded together here. So I'm just going to start to bring that in, because we've got some really nice bright colors here. Underneath this, it's still a bit wet, and that's okay, because it's giving me a nice natural blend when I bring in some of these bright colored leaves. And that's the red light, by the way, with the cadmium yellow deep. It's giving me this beautiful glow here. I'm just going to cut it in a little bit closer over here. You can see how this area is starting to work its way into the foreground. There we go. Now I'm going to bring in a bit more color over here. So picking up the red light again, and we've got a nice bright area here. And this is in shadow, so I'm going to add some of the red deep to this area as well. But I'm going to deposit first, and then I'm going to bring in some of this color over here. Here we go, the red light, and I'm going to use the yellow deep again. And I'm going to go back into this yellow area here. So this just has yellow on it, yellow medium. Bring that color down and go back to this brush here. Move that color around like so, and bring it right down to the road there. And I'm just going to pick up another brush, hydrate it a little bit, so another flat brush. I'm going to start to work into the light on the road. So I'm going to, just going to tap that out a little bit, and I'm going to use this brush here. I've got a mitt full, and I'm just going to deposit some color over here first. And this is kind of an earthy green right now. Pick up some of the ultramarine blue with the yellow and the red. So the yellow was the second pickup. I'm going to bring in some color onto this road. go. And bring that over here. Again, get some color on here. Because I haven't added any white to this color yet, I'm going to get pure colors, in a sense. Well, not a tint anyway. So it doesn't matter what I deposit there. I'm going to get a nice gray, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to deposit some more of the blue and the red over here, and I'm using the red medium and the yellow medium. Just bring that road in, and when I start to add the white, I'm going to have some lovely grays. It's hard to believe that the same colors that you use to get some beautiful browns is going to give you some really nice grays. I'm just going to bring a little bit of light in there. So this brush has a lot softer bristles. Just going to pull some of that in. I'll go back into this area again, but I just wanted you to kind of get a feeling of what this will do. There we go, bringing in some of that light. And I'm going to pick up a bit more white, and I'm just going to pull that color over. Now the road is mostly in shadow, so I'm going to play with the grays here a little bit, and then the very highest highlights would come in a little bit later on. But this gives you a little bit of an idea of the edge of the road. Now I'm just going to set that brush down for a minute, just because I have a mitt full, and I'm going to go back into the beautiful golden oranges, and there we go, really bring that sunlight through the forest. There we go. Switching to the green brush, loading it up, tapping it again, and I'm going to use the yellow deep this time, and I'm going to pick up a bit more blue, and I'm just going to see what I've got on here first. There we go. Let's bring that down and bring that over. It's fun to be messy, by the way. You can fine-tune those strokes later. Just going to bring a bit more yellow light to that evergreen tree. And there we go. Just bring that color down. And pulling the color through, shaping that tree a little bit more. Bring another one in here where the light is hitting. A bit more of the ultramarine blue, like so. Switch to my earth brush. It needs more paint. There we go. Cutting into the greens to make that tree stand out a little bit more. And you can see how that shadow color really does work in something like this. Now there are some lighter trees back there, some poplars, but I wouldn't bring those strokes in just yet. I would bring those in a little bit later. So what I'm looking at is the shapes back there. I need to step back for a moment. Okay, so let's go back in here. So stepping back is really important. It does really help you with the perspective of things, how the colors are working together. There's a big shadow area in here, so I'm just bringing in some of the cobalt blue with a bit of the red medium instead of the ultramarine blue with the red medium. It's going to give me a little bit more of a burgundy color in here. Bring that color up, and just going to deposit a little bit more there and bring that color along the bottom edge here. So the cobalt blue and the orange will work really well together there, being complements. They work really nicely. And I'm going to get a really nice transition color by bringing in a little bit of that orange from the top down into that, and you can see how I'm just using a much smaller stroke now. In the beginning it's a lot about the bigger strokes. As the painting evolves, then the smaller strokes come in handy for bringing out details and creating depth on top of a darker color, the lighter color on top of the darker color. And I'm starting to get that fullness in here. And let's move this color around. So notice how my paint is still very movable. One of the things that a lot of my students complain about with the acrylics is that they dry too fast. If you are using enough paint on your brushes and depositing directly on your canvas, they're not going to dry that quickly. The key thing is to just remember to use enough paint. And in the beginning of this particular demonstration, I hydrated my canvas just ever so lightly. My reason for that is just to add a little bit of moisture to my canvas so that when I do start to bring some of the, paint onto it, it's not going to dry out immediately. But really the key thing is really just making sure that you're using enough paint on your brushes. And then you can see my brushes are pretty loaded. They all look exactly the same at the moment, but they're not. So, that is so important. So this is my purple brush, my violet brush. There we go. Bring that over there and bring a little bit of that over here and bring that down. Let's go back in here now. So now I'm going to add a little bit of white to that brush, ultramarine blue and the red, and I'm going to add just a touch of white. Not very much, and I probably have too much, but I want to start to bring in some of those birch trees that are in the background there. So I'm just going to start with over here. So I'm just going to do this, and it's going to seem a bit shocking at first, but you'll see how I integrate that background, like how I make those areas work together instead of separate. Now I'm going to go back into the green, loading my brush, and I'm going to start to bring those trees in around and grounding them in a sense so that it doesn't look like they're just sticking straight up in the air. That could come down a little bit more. Just going to tap my brush, bring it down a little bit more, and then using my red and yellow brush, my orange brush, just kind of get that grounded. Bring in a little bit of the purple in here. Whoops, that brush. I'm just going to switch to another brush. So again, don't forget to hydrate your brushes before you pick up the paint, so that makes them nice and flexible. Yeah, that works. And let's get a little bit of purple in there. So I'm going to use the blue and the red, and I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. There we go. And bring in a little bit of that here too. And pick up some of that white. So I'm trying to use a broken line. I'm not, I'm pulling it through. I'm going to adjust some of the lighting around the trees, bring in a little bit more detail in those trees there. It doesn't look like detail, but when you step back and look at things, it does appear that way. Let's see here. Once I make a mark, then I just make that adjustment around the mark. I want to see what color I have on my brush here first. So it's more the golden colors there, so I'm going to pick up a bit more of that and start to bring that in so that you can see how that's working. Bring that like that and go back. Just soften the edge a little. Pull that right up. Take some of that, bring it over here. Step back for a minute. Okay. So this is the gray brush that I had loaded earlier, and I'm just going to pull the color onto the road there. Some of the light coming through. I'm just going to set that down and bring in some more of the gold. Some red. And there's some red in behind there. And a little bit more of the yellow in here. I want to brighten that area up. I'm just going to bring in some yellow light. There we go. Bring that, pull that color down and bring that up. This gives you a little bit of an idea on how to work with the brushes. I'm going to lighten this area here. So I've loaded my brush with the yellow light and the cerulean blue. As I'm negative painting into this area here, shaping some of the outline of those evergreens. Back to, whoops, all right, throw that brush in there. So if I load a brush accidentally with the wrong color on it, which sometimes it can happen because you're using multiple brushes, then I just get rid of it and reload. So in that case, I use the ultramarine blue, and the red is what I need, and a little bit of the yellow deep. And I'm just going to bring that in here. And cut in a little bit. Because even though this area is in shadow, there's light within the shadow areas. Not that much light though. All right, let's fix that. So there we go. And we'll add a little bit more ultramarine blue and the yellow deep with a touch of the red. It's going to give me a little bit more mossy color there. I have to go right to the edge. I always seem to miss the edge, and then my framer gets really upset with me. And, Linda, you didn't paint your edge. How can I frame that? So there we go. Always go right to the edge. And let's pick up some more of that blue and bring that in. And now we're starting to get a little bit more dimension in that area, a little bit more depth. And I don't really want that edge to be like such a perfect Christmas tree edge. I don't really particularly like that, and it's not usually like that in nature anyway. So I usually like to cut into it a little bit, make it irregular. So let's do that. Do something like that. Now I need that yellow up in here, more of a yellow up there. So I'm just going to pick up some of this yellow. Pull that color up and bring a little bit more over here. And I need to stand back again to see if I'm capturing sort of the mood of the scene, and it's getting pretty close. So here we go. Now there's still quite a bit of work to do here, but I can't really do all of that work in a demonstration, but you have a pretty good idea now how the scene is starting to come together, where now I start to use smaller brush strokes and start to define certain areas, make certain areas a little bit lighter. So I always start dark and work to light. Like for example, like this area here, like in my reference, it's much lighter, but I have a really nice mid-green, mid-mossy green here. So when I start to add the light to this area, then that's going to make that pop a little bit more. So I'll just do a little bit here, and then I'm just going to do this with a little bit of the cobalt blue and a little bit of the yellow deep, because it's not really like the bright greens that are down in here. It's more of a yellowish kind of mossy green, just the way the light is hitting the trees, something like that. There we go. And bring that in here. And you can see how just that little bit of a difference, how that makes a difference. Now I'm going to just cut into those areas just a little bit, just so you can see how when I start to go back into fine-tuning the areas, I'm going to bring in a little bit of the cutting in, basically cutting in the shadow areas behind those trees, keeping the edges fairly soft. But I'm not taking everything out. You'll see that there are some reddish areas still showing through, like in here. And what that sort of suggests is, you know, the tree trunks from other trees. And it does give it a little bit of depth, which is really nice, especially in something like this when you've got like a lot of different things going on. That really does help. I'm just going to bring a little bit over here too. Now I hope the little tricks that I showed you today is something that you can start to practice and integrate into your own work. I'm using a fairly bright palette. I'm using a primary palette really, just using the primary colors I'm mixing directly on the canvas. So the color choices I have on my palette are the cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and I have the several yellows, the cadmium yellow, light, medium, deep, and I also have an Arlide yellow, which is kind of an orangey yellow. I also have the cadmium red light, medium, and deep on my canvas, and I love the cadmiums because they're really earthy and they're great for landscape painting. But if you're the techniques that I showed you today, doesn't matter what you have on your palette and what you prefer for your colors, this technique still works. And it's just a matter of just practicing it in your sketchbook first, getting familiar with mixing your color direct instead of on your palette, and have some fun with it, especially if you're a landscape painter. I find that this technique works really great, especially for plein air. Thanks again for watching today. I hope that you learned a few tricks. I would love to see you again. Subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the notification button, and then this way you'll receive the next video when it comes out. Check out my website, LindaLovisaArtCanada.ca. Thanks again.